My manager showed me footage of myself talking to a customer who wasn't there. The store was empty, and every angle confirmed it. He paused the recording at 2:13 in the morning and turned the screen toward me. I was standing behind the register, scanning items, opening the till, nodding like I was answering questions. My hand even reached out once like I was taking cash from someone, but there was nobody in front of me. The front entrance camera showed the glass doors shut the whole time. No one walked in, no one walked out. The wide-angle camera over aisle 3 showed empty rows, clean sight lines, no blind spots. The pump cameras outside showed no one coming up to the entrance either. Still, there I was, on the counter camera, carrying on a normal transaction with empty space. I worked third shift at a gas station just outside a small town off the highway. It was one of those places that stayed quiet most nights unless a truck came through late or somebody from town needed cigarettes, beer, or coffee after midnight. Most of my shift was cleaning, restocking, and watching the clock. The camera system covered almost everything. Front doors, aisles, coolers, parking lot, behind the counter. My manager liked reminding everyone of that, especially after a couple of minor thefts the year before. If something happened in the store, it was usually on video from at least 2 angles. That was why the footage bothered me. If I'd just been caught zoning out or pretending to ring someone up, that would have been embarrassing enough. But the detail in it made that hard to believe. I wasn't staring into space. I was behaving exactly the way I did with real customers. Waiting while they looked at cigarettes behind me, leaning down to scan something, pausing like someone was counting bills. My manager asked if I remembered it. I didn't, and that was the worst part. I remembered the shift. I remembered mopping around 1:30, brewing fresh coffee before 2, and taking cardboard to the dumpster around 2:30. But I didn't remember that specific interaction at all. I asked him why he'd even checked at that time. He said the register journal showed a no sale entry at 2:14, followed by an open drawer and a manual item correction. Not a huge deal by itself, but enough that he wanted to make sure I hadn't given something away or rung up the wrong total. Instead, he found that. I watched the clip 3 times. Every time, it looked worse. At one point, I even stepped slightly to the side like I was trying to see around the person standing there. I told him maybe the angles were off. Maybe someone had just hidden somehow. He shook his head and brought up the cameras again. No one. The next shift I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about the monitors. Around 1 in the morning, I started paying attention to every reflection in the coolers, every movement outside, every sound from the aisles. Nothing unusual happened, but I found myself replaying the footage in my head anyway, trying to match it to something real. Maybe I'd been on the phone with an earbud in? Maybe I'd been half asleep and acting out part of some conversation still in my head? But I wasn't allowed to wear earbuds during shift, and I never talked to myself like that. At the end of the night, before clocking out, I asked my manager if I could look at the cameras from a few older dates. He gave me a look like he was already tired of this, but he signed into the office computer and let me. This is when it stopped feeling like a one-time glitch. 4 nights earlier, just after 3 a.m., I was on the camera at the counter again. Same posture, same pauses, same little nods. The angle over the register showed me taking something from directly in front of me and placing it in a bag. But the floor camera showed empty tile. No customer, no movement through the door, no one near the aisles. The register log for that time didn't show a completed sale either, just a price check and a canceled entry. I checked another night. Same thing. Not every shift. Maybe once every few nights, usually between 2 and 3:30 in the morning. Always when the store was otherwise empty. And always just long enough to look like a normal transaction. After the 3rd clip, my manager stopped joking about it. He said maybe the camera's timestamps were drifting out of sync. That sounded reasonable for about 10 minutes. Then, we checked the clocks burned into each feed. They matched. We checked the door chime log, too. Every time the front door opened, the system logged it. During 2 of the clips, there was no chime event at all. It looked like I was serving customers who had never entered the store. I started dreading that hour of the shift. The strange part was that I still didn't remember doing it. I'd remember everything around it. Restocking cups, checking pump 4, wiping the hot dog rollers, but not the actual moments on camera. I asked my manager what he thought I was doing. He shrugged and said, "Honestly, it looks like you think someone's there." That got into my head. A few nights later, a regular came in around midnight. An older guy named Martin, who bought the same brand of cigarettes every other night. I asked him something I probably shouldn't have. I said, "Have you ever pulled in here and thought you saw someone inside, then realized you didn't?" He stared at me for a second and said, "You mean reflections?" I told him, "Maybe." He nodded toward the front windows and said the lighting in the glass got weird at night. Then he added, almost like an afterthought, "There used to be complaints years back. People saying they waved at the clerk through the window and the clerk never reacted." I asked what he meant. He said, "Nothing serious, just that from the outside, sometimes it looked like somebody else was standing at the counter with them." Then he took his cigarettes and left. I stood there for a while after he was gone. I didn't like that he said, "somebody else." The next day, I asked my manager if anything had ever happened in the store before I worked there. He said no, not really, but I could tell he was brushing it off. Later that evening, one of the older employees told me the store had been remodeled after a robbery years ago. No one killed, no famous story, just a late-night robbery, a clerk who quit after, and new cameras installed when the place got redone. That gave me a real explanation to hold on to, and I tried to. Maybe the camera system had dead zones no one understood as well as they thought. Maybe reflections from the front glass were fooling me on the monitor view. Maybe the counter camera compressed movement strangely, and my tired brain was filling things in. Then the problem changed. One night, around 2:20, I was restocking scratch-offs behind the register when I heard the door chime. I looked up automatically. No one came in. The doors were closed. I stepped out from behind the counter and checked the entry. Nothing. No car at the pumps, no headlights in the lot. I even opened the door and looked outside. Cold air, empty parking lot, highway noise in the distance. When I came back in, the register drawer was open. I know how that sounds, and I know what people assume when they hear it. But I hadn't opened it. I was across the store from it for maybe 15 seconds. The till wasn't cleaned out or anything dramatic, just open a few inches like somebody had hit no sale. I checked the system log. There was an entry at 2:21, drawer open. No matching employee input. That was the first time it felt less like embarrassing footage and more like something involving the store system itself. I called my manager, and he came in irritated, still half asleep, wearing boots and a coat over pajama pants. We reviewed the video together. The counter camera showed the drawer sliding open by itself while I was away from the register. That should have been enough. But what both of us kept focusing on was the few seconds before it happened. Because on the behind-the-counter camera, just before the drawer opened, I stopped in the middle of stocking tickets and turned my head slightly, like I'd heard someone speak right beside me. I hadn't remembered that. The next few shifts, my manager stayed longer into the night with me. Nothing happened while he was there. As soon as I was alone again, I started noticing little things. The cigarette cabinet behind me would already be unlocked when I knew I'd locked it. A receipt would print with no sale attached. Once, a plastic bag spun off the rack and drifted to the floor right as the door chime went off. Small things. Easy to explain, one by one. Taken together, they wore me down. I should have quit. But I wanted one clean answer before I left. Something I could point to. Faulty system, old wiring, delayed video sync, anything. So one Friday night, I stayed after close with my manager and we set up an experiment. We locked the doors, but left everything powered on. Lights, cameras, registers. Then we sat in the office watching the feeds. The store looked normal on screen. Empty aisles, dark windows, bright counter area. At 2:13, the same time from the first clip, the behind-the-counter camera showed movement. Not someone appearing. Me. I was on the screen behind the register. My manager and I were both in the office. For about 2 seconds, the counter camera showed me standing at the till, facing forward like I was mid-conversation with a customer. Then, the image glitched once and corrected itself. Empty counter again. We both stared at the monitor. He rewound it immediately. Same thing. 2 seconds, me behind the counter. We walked out to the sales floor right then. Empty store, locked doors, no one inside but us. I checked the register. The drawer was open. Not wide, just cracked the same few inches. Neither of us said much after that. He shut down the system at the breaker and called the company that handled the cameras and register network. They came out the next day and replaced part of the recorder, checked the wiring, and told us there had probably been some kind of sync corruption between archived footage and the live channel data. That was the explanation they gave, and maybe it was true. But when I asked whether sync corruption could also create register entries and door chimes that didn't match reality, the technician just said those systems were integrated in complicated ways. I quit 2 weeks later. I told everyone it was because the overnight shift was messing with my sleep, which was also true. A month after I left, I stopped there on my way through town for coffee. A new guy was working nights. While he was ringing me up, he looked over my shoulder once, then looked back at me and asked, "You waiting on somebody?" I said, "No." He nodded, slowly, and handed me my change. As I was walking out, I heard the receipt printer start up again behind the counter. Just one short print, like a sale had almost happened.